saliva samples. The new method, says the Philippine Red Cross, has a high concordance rate with swab tests. The President wants to hold accountable internet service providers for enabling online child exploitation. Suspicious transactions have more than doubled to 50,000. And the FBI is warning of more pro-Trump protests as the U.S. counts the days to President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. All 50 states have been alerted. We begin tonight with experts reporting a surge in Metro Manila's COVID-19 cases. This as reproduction rate increases. But it is no longer just because of the holidays. They expect cases to climb some more due to the traslasyon. Greg Gregorio with a big story.
COVID-19 cases in Metro Manila have been on an uptrend. In the latest data of the UP Octa research team, the average daily new cases now tally to more than 400 from less than 300 during the holidays. In the National Capital Region, cities with the most number of new cases are Quezon City, Manila, Pasig, Parañaque, and Marikina. The COVID-19 reproduction number has also reached 1.17. A number below 1 signifies a controlled virus transmission. But in one PHS sa totoo lang, UP Octa's Dr. Guido David said this might not be the full picture of a post-holiday surge just yet.
It's possibly yung backlog, pero marami tayong points to be concerned about. Firstly, hindi pa natin nakikita yung clear picture kasi kakabalik lang ng testing natin. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, yung procession.
According to the Health Department, reproduction number for the entire country is at 1.1. Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere cautions the public against interpreting these numbers.
Tumataas yung kaso natin compared to the 7-day moving average natin na meron tayo during the holiday period. Gusto ho nating tignan pa ng by another 1 week pa siguro para we can have a more accurate conclusion kung ano po talaga ang trends ng mga kaso natin.
Former advisor to the National Task Force Against COVID-19, Dr. Anthony Liachon, expects the post-holiday surge to be better reflected on January 15th. But come January 24, he says another surge should be expected due to the traslasyon.
We might be expecting an increase in the number of cases that is on top of the post-holiday surge that we're expecting. And I'm afraid if these cases will increase further, that may actually lead to stricter quarantine classification.
The same scenario is expected even by the World Health Organization.
We've seen most recently on Saturday with the Translación in Manila, a massive get-together of people violating the physical distancing needs. This kind of close contact will give rise for further transmission of the virus.
Octa warns that should cases spike more, LGUs may have to implement measures to counter the trend. Lechon is also calling on the government to stop possible mass gatherings like the Feast of the Santo Niño this weekend. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Senators want to give LGUs and private firms authority to secure their own COVID-19 vaccines to speed up mass inoculation. This despite authorities being adamant that it is only possible via a tripartite agreement with the national government. Mian Los Baños explains.
Some senators wonder if there's a monopoly on the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines. That's because the Interagency Task Force says local government units and private companies are not allowed to directly secure their own shots. Some have already entered a tripartite agreement with the national government and vaccine developers.
Ito kausap ko yung isang executive ng Pfizer. Ako'y NGO na malaki o maliit. Bibili ko sa kanila direkto, payag sila. Payag sila, bebentahan nila ako. Sir, payag ba kayo? O hindi po. Kayo papayag?
Hindi po, sir. Hindi po sa hindi papayag, hindi po pwede. Dahil nga po...
Bakit nga hindi pwede? Dahil ayaw nyo.
Hindi po, sir. Ang regulasyon po natin kasi ngayon is makakapagbenta lang po ang isang kumpanya commercially, meaning sa pribadong kumpanya, etc., kung meron na po siyang commercial authorization.
Food and Drug Administration Director General Eric Domingo notes vaccines are not yet in the market as pharmaceutical companies have yet to secure emergency use authorization.
Talagang hindi pa po yan pwedeng mag-full registration. Full registration, a company will only register and any regulatory agency will only register a drug if we know the full effects and the full adverse events given through time.
Dominguez says the national government has the final word on the distribution of jabs. This did not sit well with Senate President pro tempore Ralph Recto.
The fact is this, no? We are buying 140 million doses using taxpayers' money, asking money also from the private sector. And then we're saying, on the other hand, we cannot allow them to buy because we don't know if it's safe.
Senate President Tito Soto says they're looking to give LGUs and private companies complete freedom to procure their own vaccines. For Recto, this will also allow LGUs to purchase shots preferred by their constituents.
Let's say, may LGU or I have a company, o gusto ko, Pfizer lang. Ayoko ng Sinovac. Ayoko ng Russian. Pwede ako mamili. Diba? That's the point eh. Oh. Why not allow them to choose their own if they want? At least talaga bebentahan, ha?
Pala spokesman Harry Roque says people who refuse vaccination won't be forced to do so, but he stands by his pihikan and colonial mentality remark which drew the ire of the public.
Pagdating po ng July, marami na pong papasok, no? Pero hindi naman po lahat yan pwedeng piliin ng ating mga kababayan dahil yung Pfizer po kinakailangan ng -70, no? Ibig sabihin po, para lang yan sa Maynila, Cebu, Davao na mayroong mga cold storage facilities. Hindi po talaga magagamit yan sa mga probinsya dahil wala tayong mga facilities.
In an interview with 1PH sa Totoo Lang, former Task Force Advisor Tony Leachon says the public cannot be blamed for their preferences.
Medyo off sa akin po yung comment na yun kasi ang dapat pahalagahan natin ay yun pong kalusugan ng bawat mamamayan. Kasi kung mag-i-inject tayo at makakasakit tayo at hindi rin effective, the whole vaccination plan of the government will fail.
News portal UOL, citing sources, said that Sinovac's vaccine has a general efficacy rate of less than 60% in Brazil. The World Health Organization says it is reviewing the Chinese vaccine. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
As government leaders strive to meet their targets in planned mass inoculations, how exactly is the global vaccine supply looking, and how are other countries planning their respective vaccination programs? It was late last year when vaccine developers placed their respective emergency use applications. So far, UNICEF's COVID-19 vaccine dashboard has tracked 10 shots already approved for global use. Volume of vaccines produced has reached 20 billion, 8 billion doses of which have been secured for bilateral or multilateral supply deals. The WHO COVAX facility, on the other hand, secured close to 2 billion doses for its program. Looking at supply agreements closely, we see the United States locking in deals with 6 developers, mostly from its own backyard, like Pfizer and Novavax. Other countries such as China, for comparison, is also buying Pfizer, but at lower volumes. The Philippines, on the other hand, is split between national government-preferred Sinovac and AstraZeneca, which has been the top choice among LGUs. Vaccine prices range from $2 to $44. AstraZeneca is the cheapest of the lot, ranging from $2 to $8 per dose. Others on the lower end include Gamaleya Sputnik 5 and COVID-19 shots from U.S. drug maker Novavax. Pfizer comes in the mid-range with a vaccine dose price somewhere between $15 to $19. China Sinovac, meanwhile, reportedly costs between $10 to $30 per dose. Moderna's vaccine is the second most expensive at $15 to $37. But the priciest is China National Biotech Group, which has its vaccine priced at $44 per dose. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, COVID-19 testing might just be less painful physically and financially. That is as the Philippine Red Cross pushes for saliva taste testing. And a year after Taal volcano's eruption, some families are still without homes nor livelihood. A look at their situation after the break. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. The Philippine Red Cross has unveiled a new option for COVID-19 testing that promised to be faster, cheaper, and less painful than the standard RT-PCR test. But the health department says it could be best to wait for further inputs from experts. Jenny Dongon has this report.
COVID-19 testing usually requires a swab test, a painful process for some as a 6-inch Q-tip-like tool is inserted in one's nose. It can also hurt the pocket, costing as much as 5,000 pesos. But swab tests may soon be a thing of the past. That is, if saliva testing is proven to detect SARS-CoV-2. And the Philippine Red Cross is bullish about the new method. In its pilot run, the agency touted the 95% concordance rate of saliva testing with RT-PCR. This means both swab and saliva tests will likely yield the same result. It's also seen as an easier, faster, and cheaper option.
Yung laway, kumukuha tayo ng sample para sa viral RNA. Ngayon yung sinasabi, nagbago lang tayo, kumpara mo ng sample, imbis na dot-dot galing sa ilong, idudura mo lang yung laway. Napakabilis.
The PRC proposed this method to the Health Department and Food and Drug Administration back in October 2020. President Duterte has also supported this as an alternative to swab test. Over 1,000 healthcare workers in the country will be part of the pilot testing starting Tuesday. PRC Chairman and CEO Senator Richard Gordon is among the first to try.
Hindi na kailangan ng PPE. Pwede kayo punta sa bahay, dulura kayo doon, may extra cost sa pagdala sa bahay, dadalhin dito. Good for the senior citizen na natatakot lumabas.
Prior to testing, patients are asked to skip eating, drinking, smoking, or any oral activity. A person's saliva will be deposited using a straw in a 1 milliliter barcoded specimen container. Results will be then out in 3 to 4 hours. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres says this will improve testing capacity once approved. She says the DOH is just waiting for the additional recommendation from experts regarding the protocols.
We already gave our statement to this, no? Inaantay lang po natin na matapos ng Philippine Red Cross yung additional recommendation po ng ating mga eksperto sa kanila para mas maging accurate yung basis natin to adapt the protocol.
Former COVID-19 Task Force Advisor Dr. Tony Liachon agreed that there should be further studies and recommendation from the side of experts before proceeding with such testing. But Senator Gordon is confident that they will get the approval of the DOH and FDA within this week. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
The Philippine tourism sector took a massive hit in 2020 as foreign visits slumped by 84%. Foreign guests only totaled 1.3 million, a dismal turnout compared to 2019's close to 8 million arrivals. Revenues from inbound tourism tumbled 83% to 81 billion pesos. The tourism department is banking on domestic tourism for recovery. Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat says they will coordinate with LGUs to reopen more local destinations like the Ridge and Reef Travel Corridor in Region 1 and other spots in Boracay, Bohol, and El Nido. Also on the drawing board is the possibility of international travel bubbles with neighboring countries. Romulo Puyat is also reminding the public that wedding ceremonies in hotels are still not allowed. He's also warning hotels that accept guests despite serving as quarantine facilities.
Sa mga hindi pa namin nahuhuli, mahuhuli rin naman kayo at pwede ba? I mean, ano ba yan? Is that called greed? Greed? You should already think baka magka-out, baka na naman bumagsak na naman tayo sa MECQ dahil sa kapabayaan ninyo.
The country's challenges in 2020 started after the Taal volcano erupted, affecting some 300,000 Filipinos. A year after that explosion, some families remain in evacuation centers. What is in store for them this year? JC Cosico tells us.
This school in Talisay, Batangas has served as a home for the past year for these 41 families. The Aya Elementary School has housed evacuees after the eruption of Taal volcano last year. Many of them lost their homes and livelihood, including tour guide Sara Aala. She had just given birth 2 weeks before Taal erupted.
Mahirap po sir kasi sariwa pa yung sugat ko. Tapos yung pagsakay sa bangka, mahirap din po sir. Yung mga anak ko, ako rin po nagkarga sa kanila. Ano po silang sira po talaga.
Paano sila?
Ano po na nakabaon po sa ashpole mismo. Tapos yung mga bubong bagsak po lahat.
Another evacuee sa Larina finds it hard to sleep at night. Evacuees have to share a tent with 1 to 2 other households. Salarina says they're no longer receiving aid, forcing her husband to work in construction after losing his job at the volcano island.
Ito po nga pong kutsyo na higa namin. Ang higa po namin paparto.
Dahil?
Dahil kami apat, hindi mo magkakasya din ang apat.
Siksikan?
Siksikan ho kami din.
But the LGU says housing for the evacuees might soon be on its way.
May pondo na from NHA na magkakaroon sila ng pabahay. Possible na ito ay magawa within this year kasi syempre may mga biddings pa yan. Pero may lupa na. Then as far as I know, sisimulan itong proyekto siguro itong quarter ng 2021.
Life is now more or less normal for the most part of Batangas. What used to be covered in ash is now filled once again with greenery.
Dati talagang isang roller ang taas ng putik dito, mismo dito sa tinutungtungan natin. Saka ang dagat niyan ay atras pa ang tubig doon.
A mass was held at the Talisay Baywalk to commemorate the first anniversary of the Taal volcano eruption.
Ang maganda rito, ano ang ating natututunan sa bawat calamities, sa bawat karanasan. And our mission is always to remind people of the goodness of God Himself.
The Batangas PDRMO says around 300,000 residents were affected by the volcano's eruption last year. Taal volcano is still under alert level 1, while the island is now a ghost town as it was earlier declared a no-man's island. The provincial government says contingency plans are in place should the volcano erupt again.
Ngayon tumama, napakahirap. We have the scarcity of budget because of the pandemic. Hindi natin po pwedeng sabihin na, okay lang kami dahil maraming tutulong, no, napakaraming tumulong. Pero ngayon lahat ay nangangailangan.
For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
And these are the other big stories today. 33 countries are now included in the country's travel ban list with the addition of 5 more. Foreign nationals from China, Pakistan, Jamaica, Luxembourg, and Oman may no longer enter the country from January 13 to 15, said countries reported cases of the British variant of COVID-19. Government has yet to decide whether it will extend the ban. The task force that is investigating PhilHealth's alleged anomalies has endorsed before the Ombudsman complaints against 25 officials of the state insurer. Complaints of graft falsification, malversation, among others, were recommended against former PhilHealth Chief Ricardo Morales and others. A Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission investigation had found that they have alleged involvement in the state insurer's fraudulent claims through its interim reimbursement scheme. And Baguio will carry on with its Panagbenga Festival this February, save for the iconic Flower Parade. In an interview with One News, the Chiefs, Mayor Benjamin Magalong said they will just put up flower arrangements along Session Road and open night markets. Magalong says health protocols will be strictly implemented. He says they've also upgraded their health facilities. We'll take one more break. When the big story returns, internet service providers might have to answer to authorities for allowing child pornography on their platforms. And as the U.S. is close to inaugurating a new president, the FBI is warning of more pro-Trump rallies in the capitals of all 50 states. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. The palace wants internet service providers to be accountable for enabling child pornography online. This as President Duterte expressed alarm over a surge in online child exploitation, including the case of these 3 minors in Lynn Olavario's report.
3 teenage girls in Dasmariñas, Cavite, ages 15 to 17, were rescued by the National Bureau of Investigation. Pornographic materials of the 3 minors were reportedly sent to a client in the United States from 2018 to 2019. The trafficker, no less than the mother of one of the victims. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation reported the case to the Philippine Internet Crimes Against Children Center, or PICA.
There were a lot of indecent and, should we say, lascivious exhibition of private part of the rescued children. And meron kami pang mga communications between the U.S. and the Filipina subject concerning the selling of these pornographic materials involving the rescued children.
The Pinay mom was able to evade authorities. The American male had been arrested back in 2019. He already warned the Filipina mom to stop communicating with him. Nonetheless, the NBI will file charges against the mother for violating the anti-child pornography law, anti-human trafficking law, and anti-child abuse law. The victims are now under the care of a non-governmental organization. The NBI says there's now a collaboration between local and foreign agencies to fight online sexual exploitation against children.
We are conducting online surveillance ng mga iba-ibang social media platforms, and we also coordinate with these social media platforms like Facebook, and marami ding mga NGOs helping us to conduct information gathering as to the operations done online.
Human trafficking as online sexual trafficking or sexual crime is a borderless, it's a transnational crime. It's not that easy to operate because you have arrest in other jurisdictions, you have to do operational action in other jurisdictions as well. Kaya kailangan dito mag-usap.
But the government is taking things a step further. They want the National Telecommunications Commission to sanction internet service providers that allow their platforms to be used for online child exploitation. Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles says that from 19,000 suspicious transactions in 2019, cases have more than doubled last year to almost 50,000.
The government is adopting the recommendations of the Department of Justice, which are as follows. First, to direct the NTC to immediately impose sanctions on internet service providers or ISPs for failure to fulfill their duties under Republic Act 9775. These duties, may we remind the ISPs, include, number 1, immediately notifying the PNP or NBI within 7 days upon knowledge thereof that its server or facility is being used for child pornography. Number 2, preserving evidence for purpose of investigation and prosecution. Number 3, furnishing particulars of users involved in child pornography. And number 4, most importantly for the ISPs, installing available technology to intercept or block, immediately block access to child porn.
The NBI was earlier ordered to probe into reports that students offered a Christmas sale of their lewd materials online to fund their online classes. UNICEF has already warned about the increasing incidence of online sexual abuse in the country amid the pandemic. For News 5, Lynn Olivario, We Are One News.
Now time for the big stories in sports. A look at the game with Paolo De Rosario.
Thanks, Robbie. The NBA called off the games between the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Boston Celtics and the Chicago Bulls earlier. The Mavs and the Celtics were unable to reach the 8 necessary players available to play as a league minimum. This comes a day after the league postponed the game between the Heat and the Celtics. According to ESPN insider Adrian Wojnarowski, NBA general managers have met to discuss the tightening of protocols following the postponement of games. The league still has no plans to pause the NBA season despite thinning rosters because of COVID-19 protocols. That's it for the latest in the world of sports. Catch us again later at 9:30 p.m. on One News and One Sports Plus. My name is Pablo De Rosario. This has been The Game. Back to you, Robbie.
Thanks, Paolo. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is warning of the possibility of armed protests in Washington and in all 50 states ahead of the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden on January 20. A federal law enforcement source says the Bureau has issued warnings for the next weekend, extending until Inauguration Day. This follows the violent riot by Trump supporters in Capitol Hill last week. The National Guard has sent up to 15,000 troops to Washington, and tourists have been temporarily banned from visiting the Washington Monument until the 24th. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, you can visit our webpage. That's onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.